He started early.
Yeah.
Okay, let's turn to Colossians 1:13. People live, and we're really seeing that in Revelation, that people live in a spiritual battle between good and evil. But it's the same battle that we live on a day-to-day basis, and we're more aware of that in certain circumstances in our life. But how does Paul describe this battle in Colossians 1:13?
The domain of darkness.
Yeah. And then he contrasts that with what?
The kingdom of his beloved Son.
Yeah. So we are a member of one of those. And so we do want to pray for Elaine's family. And anybody else that we know that is not a believer at this point in time. So turn with me to Revelation 9:13 through 15. I think we'll finish the rest of this chapter tonight, so we won't upset the kids. But let's read Revelation 9:13 through 15. Remember in 8:13 there were 4 judgments. It's the 1/3 judgments that are poured out on the earth. And then he says, whoa, 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 because there's 3 left and they're bad. And so last week we looked at a demonic influence on the earth. It's such torment from demons being released from the abyss. And this week we're going to look at the rest of that chapter. So, and I might have just got ahead of myself, so.
You just told us the answer.
I'm sorry. So what did John see when the 6th angel blew his trumpet? And that's in 13 through 15.
So-
Oh, good.
He saw the golden altar with the 4 horns.
Okay, let's read 13 through 15. That's true. That's what he sees. But let's read that.
Then the 6th angel sounded, and I heard a voice from the 4 horns of the golden altar which was before God, saying to the 6th angel who had the trumpet, release the 4 angels who are bound at the great river Euphrates. So the 4 angels who had been prepared for the hour and the day and the month and the year were released to kill a third of mankind.
Okay, so let's just put the details down here of what he describes.
He describes the altar that's in front of the temple. The
Yep,
one
he
that had-
does.
The one that had 4 horns.
Yep.
That they sacrificed animals on.
And we're gonna look at 8 because that's where he references, but let's get these 3 things down, at least 3. What else do we see described in these 3 verses?
The 6th angel had a trumpet.
Okay? So this is now the 6th trumpet that sounded, and each time a trumpet is blown, judgment happens. And so it shows us that judgment is coming from God in heaven and being poured out on the earth. So what else do we see described?
The 4 angels bound at the great river Euphrates.
Okay, 4 angels bound at the great river Euphrates. We're going to dig into each of these here. We're just going to get them down. Okay, what else?
They're gonna kill a third of men.
Okay. 1/3 of man will be killed. And last time we saw that they were being tormented, demonically tormented, but nobody could die. And it was going to take place over a 5-month period of time. But no matter how awful it was, they're not able to die during that torment. Okay, so there's one more thing, one more detail.
It says these 4 angels were basically prepared for that hour.
Yep, they were prepared for this hour. What's interesting about this is, I'm going to say it now because I'm afraid I'll forget. It's not in my notes. But what's interesting about this is, where are those 4 angels right now?
Still at the bottom.
Iraq.
They're what?
Still at the bottom of the Euphrates.
They're still bound at the Euphrates. And so that's kind of an interesting perspective for us as we talk about
Yes.
this. Okay, so the altar, let's read Revelation 8, 3 and 4. Brian already said something about it, which is true, but we just read that in chapter 8. And what do we find in chapter 8, verses 3 and 4?
And another angel came and stood at the altar, holding a golden censer, and much incense was given to him, that he might add it to the prayers of all the saints upon the golden altar, which was before the throne. And the smoke of the incense with the prayers of the saints went up before God out of the angel's hands.
Okay, so why do you think there in chapter 9 he references that altar?
Because that's where all the saints were before, that were martyrs.
Okay, that is where the saints were that were martyrs, that's true. Why else? Why would he reference that altar?
I'm not sure it's the same altar.
Well,
Well, it says the altar before God
yeah,
both times.
yeah, it does. So I think that the implication there for sure is that because he's already talked about it and now he's referencing it again.
So they were taking the incense to God and to be before God.
The incense and prayers.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's where
It's-
it's supposed to go anyway.
Yes.
That's for God.
And we continue, again, Joe, you brought that up a few weeks ago in chapter 6 about the significance of their praying, how long are you going to wait? And we continue to see, and this is all new for me, so I have to read some of this stuff and realize that, we're continuing to see that those prayers are participating in the plan of God unfolding.
Well, under grace, they couldn't release those prayers because the prayers for the martyrs were prayers for the vengeance of what had happened to them. Right?
Well, but they're also praying for God's program of taking back the earth to actually be real,
Right.
and the nonsense and all the awful, wicked stuff over. So it's a combination of really, and I think that's more the emphasis of it, and also the stopping of evil and killing people.
Right.
You know, all of that is combined in that. Okay.
So the significance is that it was the same altar that it was before God.
Yes. And why do you think, this is the last time this altar is referenced in Revelation. Why do you think that's true?
Because after that, the martyrs are released, and that's the altar for the martyrs. Altar of the martyrs.
They're there, but
Why are they underneath it then? I mean,
they're there.
They're just there.
They're there.
But then when they're not there because they've been released, right after the.
Well, they're in heaven. So
Right.
they were martyred on earth, and you could tell they were part of that group of people that were martyred, but they're there in heaven. But why do we think that maybe, just a thought as to why this is not referenced again?
Because there would be no more spilling of blood
Okay, could be that.
of the righteous.
Is that the last trumpet blown?
That isn't the last trumpet
No.
blown. There's 7.
Okay.
That's the
So there's groups of 7. But that's a good try, Ed.
Jesus.
There you go.
Jesus.
That's right.
See, it works every time.
Every time.
That's the easy
Who's
button.
gonna argue with Jesus?
I have a question, and it may be irrelevant, but how come the first time they mention the altar, they just mention the altar? The second time they do it, they mention the 4 horns. And what kind of horns are they? Are they like trumpet horns, or are they like animal horns?
Animal
Are they-
horns.
They're animal horns.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's
Because
the
it says he heard
design.
the voice coming from.
Yeah,
And I
that
didn't know
area.
if that was like a.
No, that's a good question. No, if you go back and you look at the original plan that God gave Moses and how to do everything in the temple, even though it wasn't a permanent temple, it was a tent, but they did everything like they did when they did the permanent temple. So there are horns on that altar, literal like animal horns on that altar. And horns, as when we pull Daniel in here, and if you remember Daniel, horns represent
Kingdoms.
kingdoms. Yeah.
But didn't they also use like ram's horns as a
They
trumpet?
did.
Yeah.
That's true.
So.
Yeah. Okay. any other thoughts about why maybe the altar's not,
Because Jesus now is the sacrifice and there's no need for an altar.
okay? That's definitely part of it.
Is it because the prayers of the people have already been hurled down to earth at that point?
That plays into it. All of those things I just wanted to have a discussion about it because I don't think it's just one finite answer, but we're also gonna see as we go forward, mercy and grace.
It's the purpose of the altar isn't needed anymore.
And mercy and grace are gonna go farther and farther away from people that are still living on the earth.
Altar, is it the altar of judgment?
It's not
So
the
what
altar of judgment. It was the altar of incense, and the prayers were offered there twice a day by the high priest. Okay, so let's talk about the angels that are described. What kind of angels are they? Are they good angels? Are they bad angels?
It said they're gonna kill a third of the people, but that doesn't mean it's
So they're
bad.
gonna kill the third of the people, okay?
They're following instructions, so.
They are following instructions. There's one key word in there that describes something about them that is a clue for us.
So the fact that they're bound must mean that they're bad.
Yeah, they're bound. And they're being held for this point in time in life, and they're bound right now for this period of time in life.
If you think about the angels being bound, the first one that was bound was guarding the tree of life by the river Euphrates.
The angel wasn't bound, but he did stop people from entering. Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So we don't ever see a real angel, a angel that's in line with God's purposes, a good angel, however you want to describe it. We've never seen that description of one, that they are actually literally bound. So God is holding them back for this point in time. Why the river Euphrates? It's a 1,700-mile river, and it flows into the Gulf of Mexico. No. How about the Gulf of whatever? Yeah.
You go for Trump?
Mississippi had
How about just the
Gulf of
Gulf?
Go for
Yeah. Not there either.
You go to the Red Sea, didn't it?
Into the Persian Gulf?
Persian Gulf.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
That was
let's just
bad.
let's Google
I
that.
know, that was
That's the
bad.
greatest thing I've
No,
ever
it's not.
Oh,
Okay, so it's 1,700 miles.
Sister Tess is gonna have a field.
Yo,
day.
She is.
But what's significance of having that? What's the significance of having the Euphrates River and that they're bound by the Euphrates River? What's the significance of that location?
The Euphrates River was mentioned to be near the Garden of Eden. It was mentioned near where Cain killed Abel.
And it's also one of the boundaries of the kingdom that God gave to the Israelites.
It
And
is
it wasn't just
Yes.
Israel. It
the
was
eastern
like
boundary.
it was the eastern boundary of
Yeah.
their kingdom.
So all of those are, the Tower of Babel took place here. The first
Yes.
murder took place here. The Garden of Eden, it is a border of the Garden of Eden, the first sin. So this is a significant location on the earth. Israel is right there. It's a border river for the nation of Israel. So it is a significance of the start of history, and that these angels are bound there for this point in time. So, okay, we've done that. We've already brought up, Louis said they kill 1/3 of the population. So, do you remember how much in chapter 6 of the population was killed? When they
25%.
25%. And so if we've got 1/3 of the population left, we're talking about 2 billion people. So we're talking at this point in time, without counting martyrs, people raptured, over half of the population on the earth is now gone, has died, or been raptured. So that's how significant this situation is. Okay, let's turn to Matthew 24, 21, and through 22, and you can leave something. We'll obviously come back here in just a minute, but let's read what Jesus had to say in Matthew 24, 21 to 22 and relate it to this.
21 and 22?
Yes.
For then there was the great distress unequaled from the beginning of the world until now, and never to be equaled again. If those days had not been cut short, no one would survive, but for the sake of the elect, those days will be shortened.
Okay, so that's Jesus describing what it's like on the earth during this time frame. And what does he say?
It's bad, it's real bad.
Unequal.
Worse than anything ever.
And he actually in his program, in his mind, in his plan of God, these days could have lasted longer, but no one would survive. So he stopped it before everything got to that point on this earth. Okay, let's go back to Revelation 9. Let's read verse 16.
And the number of the army of the horsemen were 200,000. And I heard the number.
Okay, so he's now describing, we want to relate that. First of all, he's giving us a number. Okay, what's the number that he gives us?
200 million.
200 million. There's an army of an army, what's the word that he uses?
Army of the horsemen.
Okay, is there an S on the end of it? Yes. Armies. Why do you think?
Mounted
Huh?
troops.
Yours doesn't have, well,
Mine
that's,
says army.
mine's inspired, yours is army. Okay, so my, troops.
Mine says mountain troops.
Mountain troops, okay. So, but what we're getting is the message that there's more than one army. If you would relate those armies to these bad angels that are being released on the Euphrates, what connection would we make? Potentially.
Could be the armies that are doing the killing, but rather than the angels. But I'm not sure that I read it that way.
Well, and we don't know emphatically, but it is potentially possible. It is potentially possible that these four angels are actually in charge of those armies. It depends on
More armies.
how we look at it. And there's a couple of ways to look at it, and I'm not going to say it's emphatically one way or another, but we'll look at that as we continue. So, and what did John emphasize in 16?
The
About
number.
the number, and he said what?
I heard the number.
I heard that number. Why do you think he wrote the number and said, I heard that number?
Because it's significant.
Yeah,
So he's not just pulling a number out of the air
exactly.
because he heard it. So
Yep.
firsthand.
Yep, and he's writing that down because he was told way back in the first part of chapter 1, write everything down. Okay, so
Probably more than he could count.
yes, definitely more than he could count. Some of us are older than others of us here, but I can remember in 1970, of course, Hal Lindsey, was big about promoting Revelation end times. That was big as a kid when I was growing up. But I remember when China hit the 200 million army with India, that's the first time anybody said that's a plausible human army number at that point in time. So that's, just a point. Okay. So let's think about the description that John gives us as we try to figure out anything about this 200 million army. So we're going to see huge death. 2 billion people are going to die. We don't know the time frame. Is it going to be starting here and then continuing over a period of time? We don't know. We're not given those details. But we do know the outcome of this event is going to be 2 billion people approximately are going to be killed. So, but what kind of details can we pull together from these verses and try to go, at least try to figure some things out?
You want somebody to read those verses?
Oh, how about, no, let's not go there. How about I lost my place? How about let's go, before we answer that question, I want you to ponder it, Joe. Before we answer that question, let's go to Daniel, chapter 10. And let's read these verses. And again, it's kind of like Paul wrote in 1 Corinthians 13 at the end. He said, we see through a glass darkly, so we don't always understand everything. But this is kind of an interesting passage to look at with what we're looking at here in Revelation chapter 9. So look at Daniel.
Question before we go
Yes.
there. Okay.
Yes.
So we're right before this happens is when we have the locusts that come and they're attacking everybody who doesn't have the seal of God on their forehead, right?
Yep.
So then a third of the people are gonna die. Does that include the ones who have the seal?
They are not, as we go farther through this, we're gonna see that every one of those, 144,000, survived the entire tribulation.
But there's more people that would, so could they potentially be also included in the 1/3 that's gonna get killed by these guys?
The 144,000?
No, not the 144,000.
Okay, so we're there off the table.
Let's say
who's the population you're talking about?
just everybody else excluding the 144,000. So everyone else is getting attacked by the locusts
Right.
if they do not have the seal.
Right.
So
Torment.
then these angels show up
Right.
and they're gonna kill a third of the people. Does that also include like the people who have the seal?
No.
Or is it just non-believers?
Non-believers
A third.
at that point
Okay.
in time. And it could even be, because Christians are talked about as being sealed, it could include Christians, non-Jewish people that are alive on the earth at that time, have become a Christian since the rapture. They've survived all of this stuff. So it could be they're sealed as well, because Christians are talked about as being sealed. So we don't know though.
Okay.
So we don't know that, but we know it's definitely non-Christians that are being tormented.
Okay.
Okay, and then 1/3 of those, that population, will be killed.
Okay.
Okay, is that clear? Am I
Yes.
answering you?
Yes, that answered the question.
Okay, all right, so let's go to Daniel 10, and let's read 11 through 13. Daniel chapter 10, 11, and 12 all go together. They're the same. This is kind of like the introduction to the vision that Daniel saw. And so this is how he's going to get an explanation about what he saw that he's going to put in chapter 11. Okay, so that's just that background. But let's read what we find out in 10 through 13, 11 through 13.
And he said to me, O Daniel, man greatly beloved, understand the words that I speak to you, and stand upright, for I have now been sent to you.
Who's he? Who's been sent? I'm sorry. Do you know?
Angel.
It is an
A
angel.
messenger.
Yeah, it's a messenger from God, and he's going to say, God sent me. And so I'm sorry, I should have picked it up a little bit sooner, but go ahead, Dan.
For I've now been sent to you. While he was speaking this word to me, I stood trembling. Then he said to me, do not fear, Daniel, for from the first day that you set your heart to understand and to humble yourself before your God, your words were heard, and I have come because of your words. But the prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me 21 days, and behold, Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me, for I had been left alone there with the kings of Persia.
What is he describing?
Spiritual warfare.
Spiritual warfare. So God sent him 21 days ago to answer what chapter 11 means, okay? And what happens to him when he's on the way?
He gets basically attacked by the princes, other angels.
And what is the relationship between that angel and who's in charge of him and the nation of Israel right now? You may not know that answer.
So the prince is the angel that is with Persia, and it's not one of God's angels.
Exactly.
It's a
So-
demonic angel.
Yeah, so we're
And the
seeing
one that came, Michael,
yes.
is the angel of Israel.
Yes.
the protector of Israel.
Yes, and so what happens for him to continue on his journey to Daniel?
So those princes, Michael had to come and save him, basically. And that
And-
basically indicates that that angel was part of Israel as well. Or just protect, he wanted to protect him because he was trying to protect Israel. And Israel had to be protected they had to get the message to be protected.
Well, he was sent from God. That angel
Yeah.
was sent from God, and there's some sort of spiritual warfare going on between the demonic influence of the nation of Persia, the king of the nation of Persia, and somehow there's an awareness, a spiritual awareness of this situation, and he cannot get to Daniel. And so Michael, the archangel, and if we read in Daniel chapter 12, verse 1, we would find that Michael is there, the nation of Israel's prince. And so he's assigned to the nation of Israel. So he helps that angel get to Daniel. And so we're finding out just some things we would not know, but we're not finding out a ton of information to understand it. So then let's see, what's the last verse? How about 20? Let's see what happens. So he's going to talk to him. He's going to tell him. And then that's not necessary for our purposes right now, but what do we find out in verse 20?
Then he said, "Do you know why I have come to you? And now I must return to fight with the prince of Persia. And when I have gone forth, indeed the prince of Greece will come."
Okay, so what is he saying here?
So basically he has to leave him, go back and fight the prince of Persia, and
Yep.
then after he's done that, the prince of Greece will come.
And what's the significance? So we've got two nations, and the prince of Persia, or the kingdom of Persia, is governing the nation of Israel in captivity at this point in time, plus, so Daniel's there as a captive. So that's but what does the angel tell Daniel?
Greece is coming next.
Greece is coming next, and that's exactly what happens. And that Greece also has what?
A prince,
And angel.
an angel.
An evil angel assigned. Now,
It shows that demons like to be in charge of nations,
and
over
it
kings
definitely influential.
and presidents.
And armies.
And where is this taking place?
That's taking place.
Spiritual realm.
It is a spiritual realm, but the
Israel.
physical
Persia,
part, huh? Yeah, Persia. And what's significant about these four angels? Where are they?
Persia,
Euphrates River.
Euphrates
They're
River.
right there, which is kind of an interesting, we don't know, but it's kind of, because it's all vague, but it's kind of an interesting thought that we're seeing demonic influences at that point in time, and then we've got these four guys that are, these four angels that are being released for this moment in time. Okay, so let's go now. Yes, Joe, I would love it if you wanted to read 17 through 19, since I skipped it.
Was I volunteering?
No, you don't have to volunteer. You
I just
weren't.
didn't wanna leave you hanging.
I know, that was nice of you to have my back.
Where we at?
Unlike Nate.
Revelation 9, 17,
Revelation's 9,
19.
The golf.
Alright.
somewhere.
The horses and riders I saw in my vision looked like this. Their breastplates were fiery red, dark blue, and yellow as sulfur. The heads of the horses resembled the heads of lions, and out of their mouths came fire, smoke, and sulfur. A third of mankind was killed by the three plagues of fire, smoke, and sulfur that came out of their mouths. The power of the horses was in their mouths and in their tails, for their tails were like snakes, having heads with which they inflicted injury.
Okay, so what is this army? So this is a further description of that 200 million man army. What about that description helps us to decide what is this army?
It's got to be a spiritual army because that doesn't really. There's nothing really that you can look to on Earth other than how he describes it as a being that does that, looks like that, and can do that.
So we definitely have to go. It could be. It
It's
could be.
symbolic.
What?
Well, you have to remember it's all symbolic. Horses always represent war.
They do, and we've got a couple issues going on. What is he telling us? And then what does it mean by what he's telling us?
He's telling them how the armies kill. What's used to kill.
He also gives their flag colors. And their flag colors being red, blue, and yellow match all the colors of every Muslim nation.
Yes, they do. So again, but how hard would it be to arm a 200 million and it's killing all over the globe?
How hard what?
How hard would it be to, even to arm or support that kind of an army that's killing people all over the globe?
For us, it would be monumental to
Yeah,
arm those kind of people.
it would be.
Yeah.
But, okay, but it sounds demonic because of the description. So we're looking at the possibility of, if it's not demonic, what would be the alternative? Or a combination of the two?
Well, it's demonic, just running regular armies.
Yes.
If you think about the smoke, sulfur, and fire, they're describing gunpowder right there.
Yes. Yeah.
You know,
John
Fighter
was,
jets or tanks or
yeah,
something.
John was convinced that it was modern warfare.
And this very easily could be modern warfare, demonic activity, and a combination of both. And I don't think he gives us enough detail to be able to go, oh, it's totally 100% demonic. But when you have 200 million and you think of Satan having taken a third of the stars to the earth, and then those demons are functioning, he just unloaded the abyss, and it was so much that you couldn't, it was just like a lot. So you've got all this demonic activity, you have these angels that are definitely not good, that are there participating in this, and so I don't know. I don't think we know enough. I don't think God told us enough to know, is it exclusively this, exclusively that, or a combination of the two?
So you're suggesting that the 4 angels that are bound at the Euphrates are demonic?
Definitely.
Okay.
Because we never see an angel, a good angel, bound.
Oh, that's true.
We only see, and the fact that they were prepared for this moment and all the bad stuff that happened in that area, it's almost like there's this continuation of, and of course right there is the one place on the planet God said was his. And what is that one place on the planet God said is his?
Jerusalem.
Yeah, Israel. So it's right there too, and so that's all playing into that piece of real estate.
But yeah, we think that, like, going back to what I said, that is like, we always think of Israel as this little country on the border of the Mediterranean Sea, but in God's eyes, Israel is that whole area.
That's true.
It doesn't belong to Persia. It doesn't belong to Greece. It doesn't belong to Turkey. It doesn't belong to Iraq, Iran.
Right. That is absolutely
all
true.
That area is Israel.
That's exactly right. And he told Abraham when he made
Egypt
the covenant.
is part of Israel too.
Yes, it is. He told Abraham when he made that covenant, and it's either Genesis 15 or 16. I think it's 15. But he told him the boundary of the nation of Israel, which they've never had. And which includes parts of several countries. And then if we look at a map today, you know, there's several countries that are now currently on that property that God gave to the nation.
So for God's kingdom, if he's going to restore Israel, then he has to clear that whole area of any evil.
Yeah.
And it's not just it's not Israel, it's the whole.
Yeah, and
promise
in
to
order
Israel.
for the Abrahamic covenant to be true, they have to inhabit all of
All
that
of that
property.
area.
And when we'll talk about that as we go farther through the book of Revelation. So I think we've kind of answered. It's a couple of these possibilities, and so I think that it could be modern warfare when you talk about what's coming out of the horse's mouth, and then the stinger and the tail. Those are not what we would, but could be something like that. And you got sulfur, like you said, gunpowder. that certainly lends us to think that at least there could be human beings involved in part of this.
Yeah, one of the imagery was, they were killing people with their tails. Well, horses don't do that.
Right. Well, and a serpent on their tail.
Yeah, the
That's-
serpent, yeah.
So, but that's what he could,
But
Describe.
You describe a tank and it has
Yeah.
what looks like a tail sticking out.
right? And you do
Will
see
come out
that,
Fire and sulfur. And
yeah, out of the, what do you call that?
Or you could be describing demonic entities that kill things.
Could.
An actual horse
And
that
that
has a
was the
snake on
best,
the tail.
yeah, just like when he talked about
Yeah.
those demons, he used insect-like descriptions to describe those demons. And,
Because he didn't know how to,
He
he didn't know how
said
to
like.
describe it.
yeah, he
This
said like 10
this demon
times.
is like this, it has wings,
Yes,
it has teeth, it'll
Yes.
eat everything.
yes, and he says it 10 times, like.
Yeah,
So he's
like.
definitely trying to draw a comparison to give us, and along with that, Marcy, we haven't gone back and we looked at Exodus, but you brought up several weeks ago that there are some huge parallels, and between them leaving Egypt and the things that Moses did to get them out of Egypt, there are some huge, some are absolutely repeated here in Revelation, which is interesting that God would draw from that event of captivity and use some of those same descriptions here in Revelation
It's
as he
like
brings
you-
judgment.
In my mind, I think of like the insects that we see today. When they do you look at them, they don't look scary, right? But when you zoom in on them
Exactly.
and actually look at it,
Under a
that thing you
microscope.
would not want to come at you if it was the size of this room.
Exactly, under a microscope,
Yeah.
and you
So
see
those
some of
things
these
can't
features.
exist because some bugs do squirt chemicals out there, like the stink bugs or whatever, and to repel things. So it's not implausible. Like there's things in the ocean that do the same stuff.
Right,
So there's things that kind of resemble that.
right.
So it's not out of the real realm of reality to have an animal, a horse, that has some kind of feature that's deadly.
It could, but.
But it's not saying specifically that. I'm just saying it's
Right,
when you look at things that are actually existing in the world, it's not out of the realm of possibility.
right. And then on top of that, we definitely have to get the idea that Satan's involved, demons are involved. There's tremendous torment to the population on the earth, and now there's murder.
And potentially you could have the demons lending their power to humans to do things.
Well, that's possible.
It's
Because
like
we saw
I can
demons
do things, but
inhabiting-
if I have the power of a demon, I can do
Yes.
a lot more
And
things.
we read those verses last week, and when demons inhabiting people, and the kind of strength that they tried to chain him, and he kept breaking his chains.
Yeah.
So, okay, let's read 20, 21, and then we're through the chapter. and
Because
then-
Jesus did that to in Capernaum, when he excised the legion out of the
Oh,
demon
yeah.
into the 100 pigs.
Yeah,
So like that, demon possession actually happens because
Yes.
Jesus drove demons out of a person.
out of a person into the
Into
pigs,
the pigs.
because they begged not to
They
go
get-
to the abyss,
the abyss.
which is where Satan released.
So
that-
demon possession is possible.
Yes, it is. It is.
If you-
And people do tend to see it more. I'm not saying it's not possible here in our
Right.
culture, so I'm not saying that. But people report on the mission field of dealing with a lot of demonic
Yep.
issues.
Or when the soothsayer was following was it John or who? Paul?
Yes,
And he said
you're right.
he
That's
cleared her out, and the people that were controlling her got mad
because they
tried to
lost their
stone him
income.
because
Yeah,
they lost their income because
Right.
she was possessed by a demon.
right.
So
Yeah. Okay, so let's read 20 through 21.
or evil spirit, whatever they said. I forget.
The rest of mankind who were not killed by these plagues still did not repent of the work of their hands. They did not stop worshiping demons and idols of gold, silver, bronze, stone, and wood, idols that cannot see or hear or walk. Nor did they repent of their murders, their magic arts, their sexual immorality, or their thefts.
Okay, so what John saw after all of this stuff that has just been a horrific woe to the earth, 2 of them really, and we've already seen other bad things, and a lot of these people have survived through everything that we've talked about so far. And what is their response to the circumstances?
They're not faced.
Keep doing what they've been doing.
Their hearts are hardened.
They're reveling in it. They're not just hardened, they're reveling in it, they're enjoying it, they're enjoying being evil.
And they don't, and in fact, they don't question, first of all, what do they not question?
What they're doing, they don't question the evilness of it. They don't
Okay,
question the power-
and
the
what does
power
he
that's still
describe in there that they do? Before we get into the acts that he describes, what does he draw attention to?
Worshiping demons.
Yeah, worshiping demons. So these very tormentors are still, they're still worshiping those tormentors. Why? Why?
Brainwashed.
Or my stepbrother would say better to serve in hell than reign, or reign in hell and serve in heaven. But he didn't realize, because demons have you tricked, right? Can trick you. Think you're going to be this leader and going to be doing all this stuff, but in all actuality, you're a servant to Satan.
And there is, yeah, and that is playing into, there's deception playing into this, but there's also that sense of being in charge and in
Yes.
control.
And you're
When
not.
we do stupid things,
Yep.
and we still feel like we're in charge and doing stupid things that the enemy's influencing.
It's all about self, because,
Yeah.
you know, they believe they have the right to murder, they have the right to steal, they have the right to worship
I mean, that's
demons and demonic, and by that, they're just pouring their love into like money or the possessions or.
one of the cornerstones of the
pleasure.
Satanic Bible is like, do as thou willst.
Oh,
Is
okay.
do what you want, do whatever feels good, do whatever you think is possible.
And when that's the case,
when that's the case, you see what's
yes,
happening.
and you
They start
see
worshiping demons and
yes.
stones and bricks and whatever.
yeah, and then there's no sense of right or wrong. There's no, and that do what you want fits that list. And what's the list that he gives us? That people are, this is like chaos. We're talking about demonic
Yeah.
stuff going on. We're talking about murder going on. And then we've got this chaos of choices in the middle of this. And no one pauses and going,
Demonic possession.
Yeah.
Possession or influences.
and what's the things that John describes that will characterize this time? Besides demon worship. Murder.
Murders,
Witchcraft.
sexual immorality, I think.
Yep,
I think that's
a lot of that goes on now
sex.
anyways.
right.
Governor of California proposing 6 months for murder in prison, but 20 years for using the wrong pronoun.
Murder, sexual immorality, theft, what was the other one?
I'm missing
Witchcraft.
one. Oh, witchcraft, yeah, the
Yeah,
magic
witchcraft.
arts.
Idolatry.
Which is
sorceries.
pharmakia, that word is actually pharmakia, which is drugs. Playing into that.
Don't you think the demons or whatever's going on, they have immense power,
Yes,
and people are drawn to that,
yes,
even though it's bad,
yes.
cause you see that today.
Yeah, and we're gonna see that too as we go, and he starts to, so right here, where we stop here in chapter 9, so the next several chapters are just gonna be describing, so let me go back. These judgments are in chronological order. That's what we know in this book, is in chronological order is the judgments as they come out. That's in order. But there are pauses and explanations of events that are taking place during those judgments that God doesn't choose to insert them while the judgments are going. So we'd have to try to look at time to figure out where would that fit with the unfolding. And that's what we'll do at some point. It may even be in the fall. That we'll look at this stuff with time and try to figure out what's unfolding. But we do know what does unfold in chronological order are the judgments. So the 7 seals, 7 trumpets, we're on number 6. And after the 6th seal was broken, do you remember what happened? Chapter 7 lands there. Do you remember what happened?
first angel? Yeah, the first angel.
How does chapter 7 start?
Who's gonna open the seal? Who's gonna open?
Chapter 7.
Oh, it's chapter 7.
Yeah. What do we see in chapter 7?
Oh, they were holding back the four winds.
Okay, I'm lying to you then. Let's
Yeah.
see.
Let's go look. Chapter
The
7.
144,000.
Yeah, I think that's after this. I saw the four angels standing on.
No,
the four.
it's 8. It's 8:1 is what I was
8:1.
referring to.
Silence.
What do we see in 8:1? Silence. So we're gonna see that pattern too. And I heard something today, the Jews look for patterns where we don't necessarily look for patterns, but Jews do. That's kind of part of how they view God and His Word. So we have a pattern here of, we get to the 6th seal, there's silence in heaven. Now we're at the 6th trumpet, and there's gonna be an explanation of some of the events that He's already gone through, but He didn't give us those details. So when we come back next week in chapter 10, that's what we're gonna see, is some additional details that we did not see before. And that's gonna carry through, I don't know if we'll get through all of that, but at least through chapter 13, I think. So I think it's 10 through 13 and maybe into 14 of this like pause. And let me tell you some more things that happened during those other events that you saw. That helps me to make sense of, okay, I know these things are in order, but I know some of this explanation, I wanna put it in order and it's not. And I have to bring it back to some of these times that we've discussed, and oh, it fits here. As much as we can tell, we can't tell everything, but this fits there. And it gives us a fuller picture. The last verse we didn't read, but how about Jeremiah 17:9? What does this show us about the human heart?
The heart is deceitful above all things, beyond cure. Who can understand it?
And that's what every person lives with, and that's what the enemy manipulates, the human heart. And of course then God speaks into the human heart with the truth and transforms the human heart into something that we could never be. And that's the gospel. Okay, anything else? You did good. We got through the chapters because John wasn't here.
We listened fast this time.
Let's close. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for today, and thank you for the truth. And Father, as we continue to walk through this book, you promise us a blessing. And I pray that we would be encouraged in our faith and drawn into the truth of your word, to know it, to understand it as much as possible, but also to take it into our own lives and hearts and allow you to work through it, to continue to change us so that we can participate in your plan with our lives. We just pray for everyone in this group, wherever anyone is, the challenges, the struggles, the good things. And we just thank you that you're with us and that you've brought us together and that you continue to work in and through our circumstances. And ultimately, every single one of us needs to grow in our trust of you. And I just pray that you would help our faith to grow and that we would rest in your control and that we would give you the freedom to do what you want to do in and through our lives. Thank you for each person here. In Jesus' name I pray.